Hello, everyone. Today I have a story for you. A story about a young archer who discovered the hidden power of silence, discipline, and patience. By the end of this story, you will understand how these three virtues can turn anyone into a winner. In a kingdom nestled between towering mountains and whispering forests, there was a grand archery tournament held every year. Archers from every corner of the land would gather to prove their skill, their talent, and their strength. This motivational story teaches how silence, discipline, and patience can turn anyone into a winner. In this story, you will learn why focus is more powerful than talent, how ignoring distractions changes your life, why people laugh when they don't understand your goals, and how inner peace becomes your biggest strength. If you've ever felt lost, confused, or discouraged by others, this story will give you hope, clarity, and courage. In a small, forgotten village lived a young man named Kale. He was not born with exceptional talent. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he possessed a quiet determination that burned brighter than any fleeting spark of genius. While others boasted of their natural gifts, Kale spent his days in the quiet woods, practicing with a simple bow made by his own hands. His only companions were the rustling leaves and the steady rhythm of his own breathing. He didn't have a master to guide him, only an unwavering goal: to compete in the royal tournament. When the villagers learned of Kale's ambition, their quiet whispers turned into open laughter. "Kale? The boy who talks to trees?" one would mock. "He thinks he can stand against the royal guard's champion? His arrows barely fly straight," another would jest. Their words were sharp, designed to pierce his confidence. They saw only a simple boy with a foolish dream. They couldn't see the hours he spent under the sun and moon, his fingers raw, his muscles aching, his focus absolute. They didn't understand his discipline. They mistook his silence for weakness and his patience for foolishness. Kale heard their laughter. He felt the sting of their doubt. For a moment, his resolve wavered. He looked at his simple wooden bow, and then thought of the ornate, powerful bows of the city archers. He thought of their expensive arrows and their decorated quivers. Was he truly just a fool? Was his dream nothing more than a child's fantasy? The noise of the village, the chorus of doubt, began to creep into his mind, threatening to poison his focus. He felt a storm of confusion and discouragement brewing within him. That evening, as he sat by a still pond, watching the moon's reflection on the water, he remembered his father's words from long ago. "The loudest warrior is not always the strongest, my son. True power lies not in the noise you make, but in the silence you command." An arrow finds its mark, not because of the archer's shout, but because of his steady hand and quiet mind. In that moment of clarity, Kale made a choice. He would not fight their words with more words. He would not try to prove them wrong with arguments. His answer would be his actions. His victory would be his silence. He decided to turn their noise into his fuel. Every taunt became a reason to practice longer. Every laugh became a reminder to pull his bowstring tighter. He started waking up even earlier, when the world was still draped in silence. He practiced not just shooting, but also standing still, breathing deeply, and finding a place of absolute calm within himself. He learned to listen to the wind, to feel the weight of the arrow, and to become one with his target. He was no longer just an archer. He was becoming an artist of focus. His training was no longer about hitting a target. It was about mastering himself. Finally, the day of the grand tournament arrived. The capital city was a whirlwind of noise, color, and excitement. Banners flew, trumpets blared, and crowds cheered for their favorite champions. When Kale stepped into the arena, with his plain clothes and simple bow, a wave of murmurs and snickers rippled through the stands. He looked so out of place among the proud, decorated archers who stood with practiced arrogance. "Look at the village boy," someone shouted. "Did he get lost on his way to the fields?" The other competitors eyed him with disdain, dismissing him as no real threat. Kale did not look at them. He did not hear their jeers. He closed his eyes for a brief moment and found that quiet place he had cultivated in the woods. He heard the gentle rustle of leaves and the steady rhythm of his own heart. When he opened his eyes, the entire noisy arena seemed to fade away. All that existed was him, his arrow, and the distant target. The first round began. The archers, one by one, showcased their power. They shot with flair and bravado, seeking the approval of the crowd. Some hit near the center, their arrows landing with a satisfying thud that drew loud applause. Then it was Cale's turn. He walked to the line, calm and unhurried. The crowd grew quiet, curious to see what the strange, silent boy would do. He nocked an arrow, drew the string, and held his breath. For a second, there was complete silence. He didn't aim with his eyes alone. He aimed with his entire being. He released the string. The arrow flew, a silent streak through the air, and struck the dead center of the target. A gasp went through the crowd. It wasn't a powerful shot, but it was perfect. Round after round, the same thing happened. The other archers, flustered by the silent boy's impossible precision, began to lose their composure. Their focus shattered. They started trying too hard, using more force, but their arrows went wide. They were distracted by the crowd, by their own pride, and by the unnerving calm of their competitor. They were talented, they were strong, but they lacked the one thing Cale had mastered: inner peace. Cale, however, remained a statue of tranquility. Arrow after arrow, he found the center, his movements economical, his expression serene. The laughter in the crowd had long since died, replaced by a stunned silence, then by murmurs of awe. The villagers who had mocked him were now watching with wide, disbelieving eyes. They saw not a foolish boy, but a master of his craft. They finally understood that his silence was not weakness, but his greatest strength. His patience was not foolishness, but his sharpest weapon. His focus was more powerful than any raw talent in the arena. In the final round, only Cale and the reigning champion remained. The champion was a giant of a man, his bow a masterpiece of engineering, his reputation legendary. He shot his arrow with a mighty roar, and it landed just a fraction of an inch from the center. The crowd erupted, believing he had secured his victory. The champion smirked at Cale, confident that the village boy could not possibly do better under such immense pressure. Cale stepped forward. The weight of the entire kingdom's gaze was upon him, but he felt no pressure. He was back in his woods, by the still pond. He drew his bow, his breath steady, his mind a calm lake. He let go. The arrow sailed, and for a moment it seemed to hang in the air, a symbol of his journey. It struck the champion's arrow, splitting it in two, and embedded itself in the absolute center of the target. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the entire stadium exploded into a roar of applause, a sound of pure admiration and respect. The boy who was a nobody had become a winner. Cale returned to his village not with arrogance, but with the same quiet dignity he had always carried. The villagers who had once laughed now looked at him with respect. They didn't just see a champion archer. They saw the power of unwavering self-belief. They learned that the path to true success is often walked in silence, away from the distracting noise of doubt. Cale's story became a legend, a quiet reminder for generations to come. Theme: focus, patience, self-belief. Moral: silence the noise. Focus on the goal. Your time will come.